Hello friends, it's Amy from Buttercake. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this pastel bunny cake. The filling is chocolate cake with chocolate buttercream and chopped mini eggs. Perfect for Easter or spring, or just really anybody who absolutely loves chocolate. A lot of details in this cake, and it's a bit of a lengthy video, but one that's well worth it because I think that it turned out quite lovely, especially that hand-painted bunny, which is where we're going to get started. My usual cardstock here, and I just found this nice little bunny online that I cut out, printed it and cut it out, and then I'm tracing it onto some cardstock. That just really helps to give me a sturdier outline to use with my X-Acto knife. Just going to take my time and cut it out here. Don't really need to see the whole process of me cutting that out, but just showing you a little bit because there's some smaller details like the feet on this bunny. To get started making the fondant itself, I have a little Silpat mat and I'm just putting some cornstarch down. This helps to keep the fondant from sticking. You can use any brand of fondant that you like. Giving it a good knead so it's nice and pliable and soft and easy to roll out. You'll know your fondant is ready when it starts to stick to your hands and it is consistently sticky throughout. So I'm just rolling it into a log to get more of an elongated shape using my little fondant roller. I like using the fondant roller because it has those bands on the ends that help me get a nice consistent thickness. I'm going to cut out the bunny here with my X-Acto knife. Just taking my time. This is sped up. No, I am not incredibly fast. This actually took me quite a while, as I am very particular when it comes to little details like this, but trying to keep that knife as straight up and down as possible. I know it's hard to tell because the camera's at an angle, but I really did try to keep my edges straight. Once I got that cut out pretty well, I did go back and make sure that everything was cleanly cut. And then I also just sort of referenced my stencil there, making sure that everything was cut correctly. As you cut fondant, it tends to stretch and move a little bit. So I'm just doing some final touch-ups, taking my time with that just so that it's exactly how I want it. So that when I go to paint, it's a lot easier to lay the scale down of the bunny itself. If my fondant piece is a little bit skewed, the details of the bunny will also be a bit strange as I work on it. So you can see here too, I'm actually pressing down on the fondant. I cut the feet a little bit small, so I just wanted to widen them a bit. And making sure it's all smooth and ready to go. And I let it dry for a couple days actually. Here I have my bunny as my reference. And I have some clear almond extract in the center there, pink gel and black gel. I only use pink and black to do this bunny. This is a very diluted pink that I'm starting with, and I'm just going in with small pink details to lay the foundation. And again, it is very diluted. You could also use vodka or Everclear. You could use a clear vanilla extract, whatever you like. Just something that has an alcohol base so that it dries and just leaves your gel color behind. I also don't like the smell of Everclear or vodka, so I tend to stick to my almond extract because it is truly one of my favorite smells ever. Here I'm taking my time with a fine brush, and this isn't very diluted. This is pretty much straight black gel color just to get the eyes. And I'm just doing my best to line them up. I wanted to get started with those first because I figured if I mess up the eyes, then nothing else will really look right on this bunny. So I wanted to do it with a clean slate so that I could get them nice and even so the little bunny doesn't look like it has weird, scary, or lopsided eyeballs. I did leave little tiny white spots in the eyes just to give it some detail. Next up is the darker details of the face, so the nose and around the mouth. Just using a light touch there to get the mouth done. And then this is kind of where you're going to see me start jumping around and just really adding in more layers of detail and different dilutions of the gel colors. Some is very faint, some will be a bit darker, just to work in all of the facial features and the features up around the ears of the bunny. I do also make sure to extend the color down on the edges of the fondant. Don't want to leave those white. Once you put it on the cake, it'll look a little bit strange having stark white edges, or a little bit sloppy, really. So I just make sure that I extend it the whole way down. Did want to take a moment to thank you for watching the video, and if you are new to this channel, I really do appreciate you clicking on this video and hanging out with me for a little bit. I do baking and decorating tutorials here on this channel. Some are, as you can see, much more detailed than others. Some are simple cookie recipes, whereas I also have cakes on here that took me hours across the span of up to a week at times. So this cake was rather intensive, quite a lot of parts to it, especially this bunny. Although I will say, even though this is sped up in video form, the bunny itself only took me about a half hour to paint. So really not too terrible. I do quite enjoy doing these very detailed cakes though. Mainly just my family ends up eating them. I don't do these for orders or anything. I do these because I truly enjoy the artistry of it, and I love filming them to share them with you lovely people, especially my subscribers that keep coming back to these videos. Thank you so much. All the lovely comments are really nice to get. Part of the reason I started this channel was to not just share this passion of mine, but also to make some internet friends. So if you keep coming back and you comment, just know that it really does make my day when I get those comments and likes. So thank you very much. Oh, there I added a little bit too much dark to the bunny nose there, but it's okay because it actually, you can add more extract and thin it out and blend it, as you can see I'm doing there. So that's really the part I love about this watercolor technique the most, is that even if you make a little bit of a mistake, you can kind of blend it out and fix it a little bit. It's very forgiving. The only part I will say that's not forgiving is just your very dark lines, as in the nose and the eyes. So those definitely take a little bit more of my time, but once I get those features down, then everything else goes pretty quickly. It can be a very sort of organic flow to watercolor. This part was really fun, adding in those fine little whiskers. I just use a very light touch for that part, and you'll see that that was just the first layer that I added. I wanted to work on the chest area and sort of define that line underneath the chin and the shading before I came back and added some darker whiskers. There you can see I added more. Just a nice little detail. Some are lighter with a more diluted black gel color, and some are a bit darker, just for dimension. This part was a little bit tricky, laying out the bunny arms. I feel like it came out all right. I kind of got started on it and just slowly moved to different areas to kind of create the shading above the arms and on the chest, and then very lightly came down and did the paws. I didn't want to go too dark here, but I definitely wanted to make it very obvious that these were the rabbit's paws without it blending into the rest of the bunny. So I did use a little bit darker of black there. And then adding the shading underneath the arm here. Again, I'm just basically putting down some color, and then a lot of this is just coming back and adding more depth and, using more of the extract to move the color around on the bunny. If you guys haven't already seen the lighthouse video that I've done, I also did some watercolor painting on that cake. That cake really was gorgeous. Very tall, double barrel cake, very tall, painted lighthouse. And that one was really neat because one side was very light and the other side was very dark. So if you're interested in seeing more of this painting style, you can check out that video. I will put a link down in the description for that video if you would like to go watch it. It's also a very long one, so just a heads up. But you know, I think some of these videos that are a bit longer are nice to watch. I enjoy watching other long videos on YouTube, especially food channels, whether people are talking over them or not. I just like watching people in their element. Here you can see I came back up and added a little bit more color there around the head. I realized that ear kind of just awkwardly like blended into the top of its head, so I had to add some more shading around the ears to make them very, very defined and sort of make the face shape more obvious. There you can see, as I mentioned before, coming back in, adding more layers of color and more depth and just moving things around, softening these edges a little bit so it doesn't look too artificial. And then we move down here to the bottom of the bunny. So the top half is mostly done, and the bottom here where its feet are, this was a pretty easy section because, you know, bunny feet are kind of fluffy and round, so I don't feel like it was too hard to draw out that area, as well as the legs. Going a little bit heavier handed, but I will blend it in a little bit. This part was interesting. I don't know if you can see there on the bunny that I printed out. It's almost like the leg was clearly defined, but then there was like an odd line on the printed out bunny. So I kind of tried to fix that a little bit and go with what I just thought looked better as far as the dimensions. Adding some shading down there at the bottom. And there might be points where you see that I actually get too much extract and it kind of leaves blank spots in areas or drags too much color around, but I've said it a few times, so it's okay. It's all fixable. Unlike a lot of other, you know, mediums in cake decorating that definitely you only get one shot. Like fondant sculpting, for example, which is something that I would like to get a lot better at in the future. But for right now, I'm really liking this and getting more practice in with this technique. There we go, adding more shading, and then you'll see that I do come back in with more pink just to give it a little more color, a little more brightness. I really like how that all looked with the extra pink. There you can see she's all done, and I let her dry overnight before adding to the cake. Now for the cake itself, this is a chocolate cake. It is a devil's food cake. So in my bowl here goes the cocoa powder and brown sugar, got those mixed up, and some vanilla. And then very hot water. I actually just brewed this water through my Keurig. So boiling water works as well, or if you want to heat up your water in the microwave, that also works. Whisk it very well until the lumps of cocoa are all broken down. You don't want to leave those unmixed. And then you can set that aside and get started on the other part of the batter. That is granulated sugar going into my stand mixer with my very soft room temperature unsalted butter. And this is going to get creamed together until it is light and fluffy. So I'm just pulsing my mixer to get it going. And this part takes a couple minutes on medium-high speed. Even when butter's soft, it still likes to put up a fight against the sugar, I feel like. So it's okay if it takes a little bit of time for this process. Scraping my bowl really well here making sure I get down into the bottom, especially these KitchenAid mixers. They have that weird little point in the bottom of the bowl, so you always have to make sure you scrape really well. Eggs are going in one at a time. My eggs were a little bit cool here. I would recommend having them at room temperature if you have the time. Otherwise, it takes a little bit longer for them to cream into the butter and sugar at this point, but it will come together, so it's not going to ruin your cake overall if you didn't let them warm up before adding them to your batter, so don't worry. Just getting those mixed in one at a time, bumping up to medium-high speed to fully incorporate, and then giving another good scrape. And you will see here that it starts looking less curdled the longer you mix it, and that's what we're looking for. After that part, you can start adding in the flour. I added my flour in a couple portions, just so as not to overwhelm the batter. So add a little bit and then mix it up on low speed to get it in there. There I added another part of my flour. If you add it in all at once, it's just going to try to escape the bowl and kind of be a pain. So I definitely recommend adding it in sections. And it's going to be a bit thick at this point, but that is totally normal. The last little bit of flour goes in, mixing it well. I want to make sure that you don't see any flour at this point, because when you add in your liquid chocolate, you don't want any lumps to form from undissolved flour. So slowly add that in, and if you have something with a pour spout to pour that in, because it's very thin liquid, that would be helpful and help you avoid a large mess, as I had chocolate water essentially running down my cabinets. Giving a good scrape here, and then just continuing to add in all of that chocolate mixture. It will come together and thin out a little bit, and it will give you this really nice, luxurious looking chocolate cake batter. Doesn't that just look divine? Giving everything a good scrape again so that we can make sure it is all fully incorporated. And there we are. Now I did 4 6-inch layers. So I only have 2 6-inch pans, so I had to bake this in 2 stages. I just butter my pans, and then I put a parchment circle that I cut out of large sheets of parchment paper down in the bottom. It sticks nicely to the butter, and then when the cakes come out, they come out of the oven, they come out of the pans quite nicely. I've used this method for years, and it is my go-to, always works. Using my muffin scoop here, it ended up being about 6 scoops per pan to use up all of the chocolate batter and get those 4 cake layers. Now this is a thicker batter, so I did use an offset spatula to smooth the batter out so that we get as even cake layers as possible. And I had already preheated my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. These cakes can go in the oven and bake. The baking time and temperature will be down in the description, so you can check that out down there for reference. Let these cool for a little bit. I'm just checking them once they came out of the oven to make sure there's no crumbs or only a couple crumbs attached. And then I let them cool for about 10 minutes before I run a spatula around the edges, just to make sure everything is released. And while the cakes are still warm, I turned them onto some plastic wrap and wrapped them up and put them in the freezer. Now, I know not everybody likes to freeze cakes. I will say, though, that if you freeze cakes before you use them, it makes sure that the crumb of the cake and the butter is fully solidified, so that as you are building your cakes, they will not fall apart on you. And I don't recommend the refrigerator because it actually dries the cakes out, whereas the freezer does not. So, to make the filling, which is what we're doing now, that is just powdered sugar and softened butter, creaming it together. And we want to cream that until it is nice and light and fluffy. I added the powdered sugar in 2 sections, again, so as not to create a mess and not to overwhelm the butter. You want to get it very well mixed at this point, medium speed for about 2 minutes until it is light and fluffy, always giving your bowl a good scrape all the way down to the bottom to make sure we incorporate all ingredients. This is milk chocolate that I melted. I melted it in the microwave and then I let it sit on the counter so that it's still soft and pourable, but not hot because we don't want it to melt our butter. Get that in there, and then you will see this turn into a really lovely, fluffy milk chocolate buttercream. Still looks a little lumpy here, but that's okay. Just keep mixing it on medium-high speed for a couple of minutes, and it will turn into this. So delicious. This stuff is literally just good on its own. You can use it as a cake filling. You can use it to frost cakes or cupcakes. Whatever you choose. It's a little bit sweet, but not too sweet. Like a vanilla American buttercream, the chocolate helps tone down the sweetness a little bit. So that's the filling for the cake. But then I also added in some chopped mini eggs. These mini eggs are pretty easy to get a hold of. I think I've seen them at almost every single store I've been to since Easter stock has been out. And I actually think that they carry these mini eggs year round now. So I will say be very careful as you're cutting them. I cut them all in half, and then I was able to do more of a rough chop. You just don't want to slip with the knife and harm yourself. So take your time with these, or if you want to put them in a bag and use a mallet, that works as well. Here is my thawed chocolate cake, and I'm using a serrated blade, trying to keep it at the same level as I rotate my cake so that I can get a nice level cake layer. I did that with all 4 of my layers, and then I have a 6-inch board, which I used a little bit of buttercream just to tack the cake down. There you can see I'm adding in a very generous amount of the chocolate buttercream to this layer, smoothing it out as even as possible. We want a nice foundation for our cake. The flatter your cake layers are and the flatter your filling is, the more likely you are to have a level cake by the end. Putting a generous amount of those chopped mini eggs here in this cake layer. I will say that when I went to cut it, it was a little bit difficult. So if you want to use a little bit less than what I used, that would totally be understandable. I continued on with this process. Ended up with 4 cake layers and 3 layers of filling. It might look like a lot of buttercream, but this sweet milk chocolate buttercream mixed with that lovely devil's food chocolate was a real winner. Definitely a big fan. Optionally, you could also add some simple syrup to your cake layers, just equal parts sugar and water, simmered on the stove and cooled if you plan on keeping this cake for a little bit longer in the refrigerator. There you can see all my layers stacked up, and then I actually used the milk chocolate buttercream to add a final crumb coat. I did this so that you just get a little bit more of that chocolate buttercream. More is definitely better in this case. And once I finished the sides here, I just cleaned up the top a little bit and put that into the refrigerator to set for about 20 minutes before putting on the second coat. I started with a base of some blue pastel buttercream. This is just my Swiss Meringue Buttercream. I will have a link for the recipe and tutorial down in the description if you would like my recipe for that. You'll need a full 2-pound batch for a cake this size. Smoothing out the top there, and then I put on a liberal amount on the sides. And the more you put on the sides, as long as it's not falling off, the easier it is to smooth it out. You won't have to keep adding more frosting as you go. But I'm just getting a basic coat on here. It doesn't have to be perfect. I am going to take my scraper, which this is just a 12-inch putty knife that I use specifically for cakes. And I'm just getting it mostly smooth on the sides here. Not perfect, and you will see why in a little bit. But I'm just taking that buttercream off the top edge as well, getting the excess off. And then here I'm adding in some pastel yellow. Sort of pastel. It's a little bit brighter of a yellow. I kind of liked that pop of color. I used a lemon yellow gel color for that. And then I have some pale pink gel color in this buttercream. And I'm just adding it. If there's any low spots in the blue buttercream, I just kind of fill them in a little bit. And this is just going to give a nice effect as it scrapes off. This is the part where I am taking more time to smooth all of the sides so I have a nice level cake. And you see it kind of looks like clouds, but I really like that effect and how it turned out. Cleaning up that top edge, making sure that my cake is level on top. If you have any high sides, you can just take them off. Now for the piping. This is a 104 tip using that blue buttercream, and I'm just doing an up and down motion along the bottom. I did put this cake on an 8-inch cake drum and attach that with some buttercream to finish up the decorating part. This border, I did the whole way around the bottom, and you can see there's a little bit of gap between the cake and the border because it is going to get filled in with another border in a little bit. This is a nice technique and pretty easy to pick up where you left off. Next is a number 5 round tip, piping large beads. These are just, you apply pressure, stop, and pull away. Having a larger tip will give you smoother beads, but for some reason I couldn't find my large number 10, but if you have a number 10, that would work even better. There's that gorgeous bunny. It's time to attach it to the cake. I just applied some buttercream to the back here. Since the buttercream on the cake is firm, I wanted to make sure that this bunny is very secure on the cake and it is fully dry. If you let your fondant fully dry, you can actually go ahead and store it in the refrigerator then before you cut the cake. Giving it a nice little press, trying not to mess anything up or bend it at all. And there we go. Now I'm starting on these swags. These I just kind of eyeballed. Sometimes I do mark them with a cookie cutter, but I just decided to go freehand this time with a zigzag pattern, spacing them as best I can and just trying to get them all fairly the same size. Not too bad. Using that bright yellow buttercream, and I continue with this technique the whole way around the top edge, and it'll eventually bring it right back to meet the other side of the bunny there. So the spacing was actually fairly good on this. And I just kind of tucked it a little bit behind the bunny head, and it worked out quite nicely. The next part I'm doing here is using the pink to do some drop string border work. And the key to this is applying even pressure to your bag and keeping the tip slightly out from the cake so that the buttercream has the chance to kind of get pulled down a little bit by gravity. If you keep it too close to your cake and keep attaching it, you won't get as smooth of a line. So you can see where the tip is not touching that yellow buttercream. It is slightly out from it. And then I'm just allowing that pink buttercream to kind of fall down. And finally attaching it there at the end. And again, went the whole way around for nice detail. Doing that zigzag on top again in the same blue, just to have a little bit of balance with the cake. And also I just really like the way that border looked. If you have to stop and readjust your bag, it's really easy to pick back up. You just attach your tip to the cake and keep going. I try to keep it pretty flush with the top edge of the cake there so you can still see the swags. Back to the bottom, and I just have some pastel green here. I used a little bit of leaf green gel color in my buttercream to do some patches of grass along the bottom. And I'm just letting the buttercream attach to the cake and then applying pressure and pulling away. This gives you the smoothest looking grass. It looks a little bit more natural. If you attach it to the cake and apply too much pressure at the connection point, it tends to curl and build up a lot and look a little bit more messy. So I'm just going and putting it randomly around the bottom, trying to space it a little bit evenly, doing some longer, some shorter. And then I come up to the top here, and where my swags meet, I decided to do a little bit more grass there, and eventually I'll be putting some of those mini eggs. But I'm just kind of giving it almost like a fairy tale forest vibe with some of the grass hanging down and not even attached to the cake. I thought that looked really neat. And I did decide to add a little flower crown on the bunny. So I'm using a star tip to add some little pink flowers, and then coming with the yellow to add little yellow flowers. And I like how it connected with the swags. It kind of almost looks like the swags go up over the bunny's head and then back on their way around the rest of the cake. I thought it was a neat look. Just taking my time filling in, making it look as good as I want it. And then taking a little bit of that green to add some centers to the flowers. Very delicate little dots in the center to all of them. And then I will come back in and add some green vines just throughout that flower crown to give it more of a little realistic look. A little more greenery in there, a little more detail. I always feel like more detail doesn't hurt. It's never too much in my opinion. Now to the top of the cake, taking the pink and doing a reverse shell border to cover up the edge of the blue border. Give it more of a smooth look. And then adding more grass details on top, just sporadically, spaced out, and again, just kind of letting them flop over and go in different directions. And then finally, adding on the mini eggs to mirror the chopped eggs inside of the cake and giving this just a really cute kind of Eastery look, but also adding in some extra pops of color. You can see that I chose the color scheme for this cake based off of the mini eggs themselves, that bright yellow, that pale blue, and the pastel pink. So sweet. All in all, I really love how this cake turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you made it this far, wow, thank you. I know this was a very long video. Hopefully you feel that it was well worth it though, and that you enjoyed hanging out and just watching me make and decorate this cake. If you liked it, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Give the video a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.